So, an ideology known as nationalism holds that all people have a shared cultural consciousness. It is when people in the country begin to think of themselves as being part of a single family, when they have a shared past heritage, and when they believe that their future also is intertwined, it becomes a nation. So, nation को define करना अपने आप में it's very difficult. We have many political thinkers and scholars who have spent lifetime defining nationalism, will not go in that territory. बहुत मुश्किल काम हो जाता है. And there are different types of nationalism also. Ethnic nationalism है, liberal nationalism है, you have local patriotism, constitutional nationalism, कुछ कुछ चीजें चलती रहती है. तो at a very basic level, in Indian context of 19th century, when we say a modern nationalism was emerging, what we want to say कि भाई ये चीजें हो रही, we have a single past, we have a shared past, we want to have a shared future. Therefore, our present concerns are shared. So we should come together. ये जो शेयरिंग एंड टुगेदरनेस की बात है एट नॉट ओनली कास्ट लेवल, संप्रदाय लेवल, रिलीजन लेवल एंड रीजनल लेवल, बट एट एंटायर इंडियन सबकॉन्टिनेंटल लेवल, दैट इज व्हेन द नेशन हैज. आप ये समझो कि 99.999999% पीपल इन दिस एंटायर इंडिया यू विल नेवर सी, यू विल नेवर टॉक टू, यू विल बी नेवर बॉदर्ड अबाउट, जीते मरते आपको पता ही नहीं चलेगा. येट यू फील कि आपके भाई बहन सारे हैं. You have not even seen them. You will never see them. Yet you are affected by their concern. You are thinking about कि इन सबका कैसे होगा. That is when you have shared concerns. ये जो consciousness है at that level, उसको create कैसे हुआ, वो कहानी हमें देखनी. The spirit of modern Indian nationalism emerged around middle of 19th century. I am always using the qualifier modern to just skirt the debate कि वो पुराना है नया है, हमें नहीं जाना उसमें. ठीक है. तो मॉडर्न इंडियन नेशनलिज्म emerged around the middle of 19th century due to a variety of factors. British rule with its direct and indirect consequences provided the material, moral and intellectual conditions for the development of the national movement. ये लाइन is very important. Direct and indirect consequences, intentional, unintentional both, provided not the cause. हम cause की बात नहीं करें, हम conditions की बात. Cause भी लिखो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, but safer word is conditions for the emergence of modern Indian nationalism and movement. तो हम देखेंगे भाई क्या क्या रोल था अंग्रेजों का. फर्स्ट इज अनइंटेंडेड रोल ऑफ ब्रिटिश colonial rule in creating modern Indian nationalism. First is political चाहिए था. Political integration was carried out to create an extensive British empire. So the state boundaries of Awadh, of Bengal, of Mysore, of Marathas, they were removed. You have political integration, but that is only partly true. Why partly? Because you also have 40% of India, 40%, it's not a small amount, almost आधा. But 40% of India are not directly ruled by British, it was under princely states. So you have a unified administrative integration, yes. So laws, judiciary, and structure of administration, ICAs, taxation, everything is applicable only to 60% India. Till 1947, only 60% India. Indian national movement for majority, not complete, but for majority of its time happened only in 60% of India. आज भी, I will be very honest, when I went to Jaipur for the first time in the last decade, I was little bit feeling कि भाई ये अलग शहर दिख रहा है. The morphology is because it was never a British territory. It was under British control indirectly, but not directly. So even today, when you go to those places in India which were not ruled by British directly, you see the difference in culture of people, social culture हो, architecture हो, लोगों की बातें हो, फर्क. आप में से कुछ लोग आते होंगे from princely states area. You would feel very odd when you come to Calcutta, Madras और Bombay. ये पूरे imperial cities थे. तो in 47 इंडिया में बहुत ज्यादा डिफरेंस था in princely India and British India culturally. So when we say British integrated India politically and administratively, it is a half truth, not full truth. But anyway, they did to the extent they could. Then you have English education. यहाँ पे समझने वाली बात है, British did not want to extend English education for everybody. They depended on downward filtration for long time. Macaulay's idea was to just influence the elite culture, right? Hegemony create करने के लिए. If you have to use the word of Gramsci, अगर आपको पता हो तो. Macaulay was not willing to go for mass education. He neither needed it nor he required it, nor could he afford it. So British actually wanted to put the spanner in the wheel of the expansion of education to the masses. वो कोशिश करते थे ना सबको मिले, बस elites को मिले. But any Western education was designed to colonize Indian mind and breed sense of loyalty. Initially, Indians were impressed, moved, and spellbound due to British material progress. ये होता था. We have many people who became very loyal. Dada Bhai Nauroji himself said, आप look at the life of Dada Bhai Nauroji. वो 1850s 60s में इंडिया में थे. Then he moved to London, and for 2, 3, 4 decades he was there in London, and then he came back for some time. तो दादा भाई नौरोजी के बचपन में, in his childhood, he has seen इंडिया का वो पार्ट which was प्री ब्रिटिश इंडिया. वो ऐसा इंसान है जो द बिगिनिंग ऑफ 19th सेंचुरी है. उसके पिताजी was there in the pre British India, and then he has seen the transition in his own lifetime from the pre British to the pinnacle of British rule in the later half of 19th century. He has visited London, he has seen industrial revolution, he has seen modern parliament, he has seen the material change and progress that was there with British. उनकी आंखें चकाचौंध रह गई, भाई ये हम कहाँ पे, ये कहाँ पे गए. हम अभी तलवार लेके चल रहे हैं, इनके पास तो तोपे है बड़ी बड़ी, इंडस्ट्री है. So that generation was genuinely impressed by the progress of British and English education, and they felt कि भाई if we remain loyal for some time, maybe British will be truly British, and what they are professing कि they are here for civilizing mission and making India better, सच में कर दे तो हमारा फायदा हो उसमें. That was the belief of that generation which was created by British. That was their idea also. After 1857, देखो idea क्या है. On one hand, these princely states, they helped in 57, so they are our loyal. Aristocrats and zamindars and talukdars, they helped us, they are also loyals. Middle class, उनको अंग्रेजी पढ़ा देंगे, उनको हमारी value पता देंगे, they will become our loyal. So these were created, cultivated as pillars of government. इनको हम अपने pillar बना दें ताकि इंडिया पे राज कर पाए. First two generally remained loyal to British. The third one, the middle class, gradually, initially was very impressed, but within a decade or two, gradually it became disillusioned कि इनके कथनी करने में अंतर है, हमें कुछ अलग करना पड़ेगा. That was the failure of the agenda of British education policy from their perspective. But anyway, so initially Indians were impressed, moved, and spellbound. In reality, Indians selectively appropriated English education. Indians learned political rights and Enlightenment philosophy. They acquired the ability to study the foreign evil and soon started crafting criticism of colonialism. They imbibed this rationality, liberty, equality, fraternity, French Revolution, etc. And Rousseau and Thomas Paine, everybody. वही सवाल पूछना शुरू कर दिया कि आप ये सब कर रहे हैं यूरोप में, यहाँ पे क्यों नहीं कर रहे? Then they started using the language of politics that they had imbibed through their exposure to Western political ideas. सबसे important बात यहाँ पे क्या होती है? Because of this exposure to the Western political ideas, Indians started to see themselves कि we have been educated, we have learned English, we have been earning money, we are equal with you. If you don't treat us as equal, then it is beneath dignity for us. हमें equality चाहिए. भले इंडिया as independent nation हो ना हो, वो बात में देखेंगे. Independence is not the question. Question is of equality. Why is it that only a foreigner, a Gora person can become ICS? Why can't Indians become ICS? Indians should have share in the participation in the governance of their own country. It's okay, you are more developed, you are here for our civilization, so please stay. We don't want you to go. But whatever you do it with our consultation. Take us with you. हमें भी वहां पे कुछ हिस्सा दो, भागीदारी दो. तो डिमांड इज ऑफ इक्वालिटी एंड भागीदारी, नॉट ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस बाय दिस पीपल. बट जब वो भी नहीं मिलती है और मतलब चप्पे चप्पे पे आपका अपमान होता है, देन यू से कि भाई वी विल नेवर बी ट्रेड इक्वली, वी कैन नेवर है भागीदारी, क्योंकि यह देने वाले हैं कि नियत अलग है. तो ओनली सोल्यूशन इज गो फॉर इंडिपेंडेंस. वो बाद में कहानी है. Then English language emerged as lingua franca of the rising intelligentsia. That is also important. You have a new middle class that emerged and that can talk to each other in one common language. Sanskrit is long gone. It is not an elite language anymore. It is language for religion only. Parsi is also long gone, and it was not known to everybody. But English definitely emerges as one language that can connect elites from Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras together with the world, not with themselves, but with the world also. So that language actually is the language of the emerging elite in every regional pocket. and they start talking to each other. You have creation of that thin layer of middle class across India which talks to each other. ये भी पहली बार हुआ भारत में, पहले इंडिया में कभी नहीं था, कभी नहीं था. The point is that if I say कि it is English language that created modern nationalism, well, no. No, English did not create modern nationalism. It emerged out of the colonization and the exploitation and anti-colonial feeling, insensitivity. But when that sensitivity and requirement had arose already, उसको articulate करने के लिए concepts and language that was provided by knowledge of English. तो इंग्लिश ने उसको shape दिया, create नहीं किया modern nationalism. And rather, if you see कि English had a counter impact also. You know, it did not always connect people all across India. A Bhadralok in Calcutta is talking to Parsi Shetiyas in Bengal, in Bombay, talking to the Tamil Brahmin in Madras. ये तो होता था, no doubt. But English also divided people because very few people could go to English school, afford a good education in some upper caste, middle class, urban center. तो जब वो education के through बाहर निकलते थे, they would feel at distance from rest of India. वो आज भी होता है. So India में between regions, between cities and villages, between communities, etc., English education also created differences. तो एक तरफ जोड़ने का काम किया है, एक तरफ तोड़ने का भी काम किया है, दोनों किया है. So we cannot say कि it is English which created modern nationalism for two things. पहली बात मैंने बताया, उसने बस उसको vocal articulate किया, create नहीं किया. दूसरा, जोड़ा तो तोड़ा भी. और तीसरी बात है, we have to understand कि actual nationalism has emerged in vernaculars. हिंदी में, तमिल में, बांग्ला में और मराठी में, पंजाबी में. Because nationalism cannot be only that of elites. It has to be of masses, and masses consumed, masses talked in the vernacular languages. So we cannot give that status to English language as such. ठीक है? I hope you understand why I'm trying to elaborate these things. ठीक है? When you come to rail, telegraph, and unified postal networks were created for tighter control over India to facilitate more efficient exploitation. However, it also gave rise to pan-Indian contacts and strengthened Indian unity. It made possible new associations, bonds, idea of unified India. And in modern press was initially started by some disgruntled British Indian officers against मतलब अंग्रेज लोग ही, when they were posted in India and they had grievance against governor general or etc., they had started their own press for British people. But gradually, it was copied by Indians also. तो इन ऑल दिस थिंग्स, हम अगर अंग्रेज कहेंगे कि हमने भारत देश बनाया, कैसे बनाया भाई? यूजिंग दिस 4-5 थिंग्स. तो फॉर ऑल 4-5 थिंग्स वी नो उनका एजेंडा वाज नॉट टू क्रिएट मॉडर्न इंडिया, बट टू मेक इट मोर एनस्लेव्ड, मोर कॉलोनाइज्ड एंड गेट इट मोर एक्सप्लॉइटेड. इट वाज एन अनइंटेंडेड accidental consequence, byproduct of these things that Indian nationalism could emerge. So we cannot and must not give credit of modernization and nationalism to British. So all these initiatives were undertaken to fulfill the British colonial interest and not for the benefit of India. The positive impact of these changes was, or were anyway, unintended, indirect, accidental, but unavoidable byproduct. So British don't get any credit for it. But then British do get credit for some negative changes that they brought. उसके लिए they have direct reason. पहली बात तो है, British rule was colonial in character. It was never Indian. It was colonial. It was despotic, anti-people, unethical, immoral, unfeeling, insensitive, and especially alien. तो मैंने कहा था आपको कि this line is to be just mugged up and to be used in any question. It could be रैयतवाड़ी, महलवाड़ी, जमींदारी, फेमाइन पॉलिसी, जहां भी लगाना इस line को लगा दो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं. It's a common line. And it is true, like, it's very factual. Then you go to economic integration in a negative way. अंग्रेजों ने एक बात पक्की, सबको गरीब कर दिया, सब भिखारी हो गए, सब नंगे हो गए. मतलब metaphorically, but destruction of rural craft across India, de-urbanization of all old cities, poverty of everybody, agriculture got ruined. So in a way, India got unified economically, as British say, but in a negative sense. Now, this wherever you come from, आप कोई भी जाति के हो, कोई भी समाज के हो, कोई भी region के हो, now you have a common grievance. British brought all Indians on same plane of economy, irrespective of socio-cultural background, by exploiting them. सब लोग शेयर करते कॉमन चीज क्या थी, हम सब एक्सप्लॉइटेड है, भले कोई ब्राह्मण हो कोई दलित हो, एवरीबॉडी इज एक्सप्लॉइटेड इन सम वे और द अनदर. दैट इज द वे ब्रिटिश यूनिफाइड इंडिया. ठीक. So Indian interests were subordinated to the British interest, and Indian resources were exploited by every possible means. It became the major cause of economic backwardness and halted India's economic, socio-cultural, political, and intellectual growth. Every class and section of Indian society, could be peasants, artisans, workers, capitalists, and rising class of intellectuals, all of them suffered due to it. एक बस क्लास था जमींदार एंड प्रिंसेस. इनिशियली दे बेनिफिटेड समवॉट, बट वेरी सून दे ऑल्सो रियलाइज्ड कि उनका भी कोई ठीक नहीं हो रहा. तो ग्रेजुअली बाय 1930s 40s यू विल सी दे ऑल्सो स्टार्टेड टू सपोर्ट नेशनल मूवमेंट. वो बात नहीं थी, बट हुआ, सबको धीरे धीरे पता चल गया. This suffering triggered a strong sense of anti-British discontent among the masses. And ये आपको समझना चाहिए, in many, देखो how does nationalism emerge? उसके दो मॉडल्स, एक यूरोपियन, एक है थर्ड वर्ल्ड मॉडल. व्हाट इज यूरोपियन मॉडल? यूरोपियन मॉडल में यू डोंट हैव एनी कॉलोनाइजेशन, जो हम अभी बात कर रहे हैं. लाइक इंग्लिश मॉडल नेशनलिज्म, फ्रेंच नेशनलिज्म, जर्मन और इटालियन, ये सब जो स्पेनिश, ये सब जो क्रिएट हुए हैं, स्पेनिश तो चलो अलग कहानी है थोड़ी सी, इसमें देयर हैज बीन सम एथनिक एलिमेंट which unified all of them. You have a king, a monarchy who wants to create a strong state, and for strong state, he wants to have the strong base amongst people. So some of them were bottom-up nations, some of them were top-down nations. Top-down मतलब क्या है? The state has already unified the territory, and then it engages in creating nationalism amongst the people. In the case of England, वेल्श, स्कॉटलैंड एंड नॉर्थ आयरलैंड और आयरलैंड, ये सब यूनिफाई पॉलिटिकली करा दिया गया एट टॉप लेवल. एंड देन इंग्लिश वाज एनफोर्स्ड कि इंग्लिश इज योर मदर टंग, करो सब. एंड यू आर ऑल एंग्लिकन, प्रोटेस्टेंट, यू कैन नॉट बी कैथोलिक, हो जाओ. सो इट्स टॉप डाउन एनफोर्स्ड. तो अभी हम देख रहे हैं इन 21st सेंचुरी इट इज अनराइवलिंग ग्रेजुअली. इन 19th सेंचुरी नॉर्थ आयरलैंड का इशू हो गया, इन 20th सेंचुरी, इन 21st जो है स्कॉटलैंड का इशू चल रहा है, इट इज अनराइवलिंग. You go to France, Paris की French is enforced as a standard French on entire France. बिल्कुल नहीं थी. If you go to Spain, the same thing है, Basque region and Catalonia चल रहा है. So यहाँ पे in case of Europe, my point is that they created their nations based on common language, common religion and common enemy. And this sounds very funny, but it is true. For British, the enemy was French. French के against हम सारे इकट्ठा है. So that brought them together. French को British का अगेंस्ट सारे इकट्ठा है. So counterpoints. Germany the same thing, anti-British, anti-French. So you should have common religion, common language, and one enemy, and then you create ethnic uniformity as far as possible inside your geographic territory. Then you become. That was a European model. It is not Indian model. It is not American model. It is not any other model. Then the nationalist idea which emerged in this 18th 19th century Europe, which came outside India की बात करते हैं, it started as a nationalism not on ethnic. इतने भी ethnic हो ही नहीं सकता. कैसे होगा ethnic? आपकी भाषा अलग है, जाति अलग है, धर्म अलग है. How can you create ethnic nationalism? It is impossible. अगर हाइपोथेटिकली समझो सारे हिंदू लोग हो जाते हाइपोथेटिकली, तो उसके अंदर का डाइवर्सिटी कम है. कितने संप्रदाय है, झगड़ा वहां पे भी हो सकता है और हुआ है हिस्टोरिकली. तो एथनिक लैंग्वेजेस भी अलग अलग है. सो इंडिया कैन नॉट हैव एथनिक नेशनलिज्म. अमेरिका ऑल्सो डजंट हैव एथनिक नेशनलिज्म. यहाँ पे जो पैदा होता है वो होता है एंटी कॉलोनियल नेशनलिज्म. इट इज नॉट बेस्ड ऑन वन लैंग्वेज, वन रिलीजन एंड वन एनिमी. It has emerged on a common platform that we all share common interest. वो कहाँ से बनते? Because all of us were exploited by British. So our nationalism is based on the anti-colonialism originally. That brought us together. And it is not only in case of India. Japan, before they got colonized, they were afraid that we might get colonized, let us do that. America, anti-British, anti-colonial movement, a freedom movement. You go to Spain also, Spain को भी occupy किया था फ्रांस ने, तब जाके बनता है modern Spanish nationalism. China, was divided into spheres of influence by European powers, it is anti-colonial nationalism. So there are two major historical phases. In 19th century, it is highly ethnic type nationalism in many cases, but some other also. But European nationalism is of that type. Then you come here, you have anti-colonial. So it is a very broad based. ये सवाल पता है लोगों ने पूछा था. Not only अंग्रेज कहते you don't have nation. So Indians had to risk. मैंने कहा British said John Seeley and Stuart ये Strachey. They said India nation है नहीं. And this was addressed to Indian intelligentsia. जो बोलता था हम भारतीय, बोले कहाँ के भारतीय, भारत है कहाँ पे? People tried to answer that. One of the founders of Congress was Sundaraj Banerjee, S.N. Banerjee. S.N. Banerjee ने किताब लिखी है उसके लिए, India Nation in the Making. Nation in the Making. कि इंडियन नेशनलिज्म किस तरह है? It is nation in the making. हम ना पूरे नेशन बन चुके हैं, ना हम अधूरे नेशन. Nation in the making. It's the concept of being, if you understand philosophy. ठीक है, तो हम नेशन बन रहे, बनते बनते रहेंगे, चलता रहेगा. सो ये जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, इट इज अ वेरी फिलोसॉफिकल कॉन्सेप्ट. द पॉइंट इज दैट इससे आपका काम नहीं पूरा होता. इट्स अ गुड कॉन्सेप्ट, बट इससे हम उस रास्ते पे चल पड़े हैं, पूरे नहीं पहुंचे, बट काम नहीं होता इससे. व्हेन यू नो नेशन, नेशन शब्द को मैंने उस दिन कहा था, कोई बंगाली यहाँ पे थी, है आई डोंट, हाँ आप तो कहा, जाति वाली बात हमने करी थी कि दैट वर्ड वाज यूज्ड फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम बंकिम चंद्र चटर्जी. जब बंकिम को पूछा था कि भाई ये नेशन है क्या इंडिया में, कौन सी भाषा है, वो जाति, वो जाति इज कास्ट एंड कम्युनिटी. दैट वाज द सेम वर्ड दैट वाज यूज्ड फॉर नेशन आल्सो. तो हाउ योर parochial and local consciousness is gradually emerging into national consciousness, that is indicated by this word jati. या फिर देश. The UPSC asked question of सखाराम गणेश देउस्कर, देशर कथा 4 साल पहले 2020 में पूछा था. देशर कथा किताब किसने लिखी है वगैरह. देशर कथा, देश इज ऑल्सो द वर्ड दैट इज यूज्ड फॉर कंट्री. बट देश मतलब क्या है? हम बोलते मराठी देश. राष्ट्र अगर शब्द है तो महाराष्ट्र है, तो राष्ट्र के ऊपर महाराष्ट्र आएगा क्या? नहीं आएगा ना. वो महाराष्ट्र के नीचे इंडिया, अगर भारत एक राष्ट्र है तो महाराष्ट्र के अंदर है, महा होने के बावजूद. Why? Because this terminology of Rashtra, Desh and Jati, these three words are pre-modern. They had different meaning in the previous part. Rashtra was a province in ancient time, not a nation. So we have repurposed their meaning to suit, because नया consciousness आया है, नए शब्द बनाने पड़ेंगे आपको. तो कुछ शब्द नए बनेंगे, कुछ पुरानों को हम नया आयाम देंगे, नया डायमेंशन देंगे. So क्वेश्चन ये था कि हाउ डू यू फिट दिस लोकल रीजनल कम्युनिटी आइडेंटिटीज इनटू वन नेशनल आइडेंटिटी. डू यू गो अगेंस्ट देम? हम बोलते इंडिया यूनिटी एंड डाइवर्सिटी. हाउ डू यू ब्रिंग यूनिटी आउट ऑफ डाइवर्सिटी? डू यू हैव टू किल डाइवर्सिटी फॉर दैट? So it was a big question. Even today it's a question, but in 19th century it was a very big question. तो यहाँ पे to have that phrase, I don't, anyway, जब बंकिम ने कहा कि जाति कैन बी अ वर्ड फॉर नेशन, इवन सर सैयद अहमद खान ने कहा कौम, कौम इज कम्युनिटी नॉट अ नेशन ओरिजिनली. बट हमारे यहाँ कौमी तराना मतलब नेशनल एंथम बन गई. तो जाति, कौम, देश, राष्ट्र, ये शब्दों का आयाम चेंज कर रहे हैं टू फिट द आइडिया ऑफ नेशन. तो उसमें टागोर आते हैं. टागोर को यही पूछा कि वेयर इज इंडियन. देखोगे कहा सिंपल बात यह है कि देयर इज अ वर्ड कॉल्ड भारतवर्षीय महाजाति, कि एक भारतवर्ष जो है एक महाजाति है, इसके अंदर सब जातियां आ जाएंगे. So when you have to create a nation, we have to create an additional supra-regional, supra-class, supra-community identity which will subsume all other identities. Bharatvarshia Mahajati, that is India. Indian, why it is important for you to understand? Because unlike in England, unlike in France, unlike in Germany, when those nationalisms emerged, they crushed their local identities, local dialects, regional ideas. We did not. अगर हम करेंगे देश बनेगा नहीं. We cannot say you cannot be Tamil, you have to be only Indian. Impossible. So how to fit in all these regional identities into one national identity? Bharatvarshia Mahajati is a term that is used by Rabindranath Tagore, a fantastic word. But did it succeed everywhere? It did not. In case of Maratha, in case of Punjab, in case of Bengal, you see, it became very easy to fit in those local identities in national identities. कोई दिक्कत नहीं थी. Sometimes it did not happen. जैसे कि in case of Islam, we had to go for two nation theory. In case of Dravidian, It is still together, but थोड़ा सा कभी मारपीट हो जाती है बीच बीच में कभी कभी. It is a very difficult being together, but we manage, we survive. So to create a nation, ये कहानी की शुरुआत हुई, it was a huge challenge in front of this emerging intelligentsia. अब समझो कि ये चैलेंज आज भी है. उस जमाने में एडिशनली क्या था, अंग्रेज राज भी कर रहे थे विद देयर वेरी कीन आई ऑफ डिवाइड एंड रूल. तुम कहाँ पे पहुंचे? So economic integration, suffering was common, which brought us all together. The next point is cultural ideological imperialism, the British propaganda. यहाँ भी you have a direct but a negative role of British. Indians were never able to rule themselves in the past, and they are destined to be ruled by the foreigners forever. पहले आर्यंस आए, शक आए, कुषाण आए, मुगल आए, हम भी आ गए. नई बात क्या है? आपका इतिहास आपके दिखा है यहाँ पे, यही तो होगा. That is their propaganda. Then they would say uncivilized and degraded culture, and thus Indians are unfit for democracy. That we have discussed already. On the scale of civilization, you are at very bottom. We have to make you learn and civilized, and then maybe you can become fit for democracy. That's why we have the reform agenda. But reform agenda actually acted as the tool of control. So we have the socio-cultural, psychological control through हम आपके ऊपर reform देंगे, हम देने वाले, आप लेने वाले. And then humiliating missionary criticism and conversion projects. So you have different things because of which you have not only economic exploitation, but also the cultural imperialism. And these things triggered reactions which became Indian nationalism of modern type. Then you have racism. So British believed in the theory of superior race and considered Indians as inferior race, which was uncivilized and untrustworthy. You have, for example, a very famous magazine back in London at that time, published almost, I think अभी भी चल रहा है, पता नहीं चल रहा है कि Punch, PUNC, Punch magazine, PUNCH. So PUNCH, Punch magazine was very famous for cartoons. And in those cartoons, political cartoons, Indians were shown as half human, half gorilla, all the time. कैरिकेचर बनता है, कार्टून कैरिकेचर. तो इंडियन कैरिकेचर हाफ ह्यूमन हाफ गोरिल्ला, ये मतलब ऐसे लोग हैं, not even completely human yet. And that was a stereotype in the British mind for decades and decades through cartoons also. That shows कि you are so racist. जो अभी बीच में हुआ था 2-3 साल पहले, जो चंद्रयान की कहानी हुई थी, आई थिंक यू might have seen that cartoon. तो ये पहली बात थोड़ी है, ये तो उनकी परंपरा है. That has been the way to rule India. ठीक है, आज भी यू सी मेनी सीरीज इन हॉलीवुड ऑल्सो, यू हैव वो कहानी की भाई सपेरे, एलिफेंट, ये क्यों चल? दिस इज द कल्चरल स्क्रिप्ट क्रिएटेड टू रूल इंडियंस, एंड वी इंटरनलाइज दोस थिंग्स. सो उसका रिस्पॉन्स तो आएगा. सो दस द ब्रिटिश रूल created circumstances for the birth of Indian nationalism, but at the same time, it should be understood that it was essentially colonial rule. Both are antithetical to each other. British tried to suppress Indian nationalism from the very beginning rather than being facilitator of it. It is impossible, even theoretically, to imagine a colonial rule supporting nationalism. हो ही नहीं सकता. They can't exist. एक म्यान दो तलवार. Either you are colonial or a nationalist. They're antithetical to each other. So British may claim कि we are creating Indian nationalism. भाई कैसे? खुद की खबर खुद थोड़ी खोदोगे आप. It is impossible. So we have to say that British rule did not purposefully with good intention create nationalism, but it led directly and indirectly to the emergence of nationalism. The conditions they created through exploitation are the reason. So how did Indians respond? The first response was obviously these proto-nationalist movements which we have seen. Land of snake charmers, correct? So there were many peasant tribal rebellions against the British in the post-1858 decades. Numerous such rebellions indicate the widespread discontent prevailing against the British rule in the country. However, most of them were localized, did not pose any serious threat to British rule, and thus they were easily crushed. बात अगर है कि whatever tools you have to oppose British, you have tried and failed again and again. मतलब ये tool अब काम नहीं करने वाले. You have to learn new tools. नया दुश्मन है, नया हथियार चाहिए, and that नया हथियार is modern political sector. So the question is, how did this modern sector emerge? So besides such uprisings in the midst of 19th century, there was also a gradual emergence of middle class intelligentsia. दिस इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट। अब ये मिडिल क्लास जो होता है, जहां जहां जब जब whenever and wherever it has emerged to be a very important political actor, इसने पूरे देश का मुस्तकबिल चेंज कर दिया। It has altered the future and destiny of nations in good and bad both ways. It is to in Europe also the rising middle class brought nationalism, supported monarchy, created industrial revolution, and also it created municipal reforms, judicial reforms, liberal democracy. सब क्यों आता है? Because of rise of middle class. In India also, what happened in Europe in the 17th and 18th century is now happening in 19th century. But middle class कहाँ से आ गया अचानक से? Did it not exist before? Depends on how you define middle class now. That is another debate altogether. If you go by income hierarchy, middle income is middle class. It's not true. If you go by, let us say, the self-consciousness of middle class, कि I consider not rich and not poor, मैं बीच में हूँ, it is also not true. How do you assess who is middle class? If you go by the traditional middle castes, is it a middle class? Maybe, may not be to some extent. Sometimes it is true, most it is not true. It is, do you go by modern professions? Perhaps यहाँ पे you see the location of emerging middle class, कि भाई journalism, printing, वकीली, justice, judiciary, modern teachers, clerks, ये सारे merchants, ये सारे new traditions, new professions बन रहे हैं, and they are coming into being because of British rule. और वहां पे जो जो जा रहा है वो धीरे धीरे मिडिल क्लास बन रहा है, मिडिल इनकम का. They are the ones who think they are national. They have learned Western knowledge. They have got English, and they have exposure to Westernization. They have exposure to British. That middle, which is very thin, वो धीरे धीरे सोचता है कि मैं इस देश का नेता हूँ. I want to. So all these middle class people, and they don't come from vacuum. Originally, if you go one generation before them, they come from some landed gentry, और some जमींदार का बेटा होता है वो, या कोई ना कोई अपर और मिडिल कास्ट के ही लोग होते हैं, बट दे ट्राई टू फिट देमसेल्फ इन द मॉडर्न स्टेट स्ट्रक्चर, इन द मॉडर्न प्रोफेशंस. वहां से मिडिल क्लास बनना शुरू होता है. एंड अब यहाँ पे चीज क्या हो रही है? जो आपके ओल्ड स्कूल नेता थे, जैसे कि झांसी की रानी लक्ष्मीबाई, नाना साहेब, तात्या साहेब, दीज पीपल आर नो मोर योर नेतास. सदियों से जो राजे महाराजे रह चुके हैं या साधु मुनि रह चुके हैं, जो आपको अलग अलग सेक्टर में लीड करते थे, अब ये धीरे धीरे फेड हो रहे हैं, साइडलाइन हो रहे हैं. एंड अ न्यू एनर्जी इज इमर्जिंग, न्यू क्लास, दैट इज मिडिल क्लास, एंड दे सून विल स्टार्ट क्लेमिंग वी वांट टू बिकम इंडियाज लीडर्स. एंड दैट नेवर हैपेंड इन द पास्ट. द स्टोरी ऑफ द इमर्जेंस ऑफ मॉडर्न पॉलिटिक्स is also the story of the emergence of modern middle class. शुरुआत में, I don't want to be very Marxist here. Maybe I'm sounding little Marxist. है ना? आपने देखा है वो किताब पढ़ी है, AR देसाई किताब, ये थिंकर AR देसाई, मार्क्सिस्ट थिंकर. He has written in 1930s, 1950s की किताब है, बट हिस्ट्री टिल 1935 लिखी है उसने, द सोशल हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन नेशनलिज्म. तो उसमें सारी ये बातें आती है. बट एनीवे, so besides such uprisings, by the midst of 19th century, there was also a gradual emergence of the middle class intelligentsia. It happened due to the circumstances created by colonization of India by the British. It hoped that British rules, but it hoped that British rule would modernize India soon. अच्छा नहीं say its hope. Its hope that British rule would modernize India soon evaporated. It started to recognize that British rule was hindering their progress. तो पहले तो they were taught English, they thought उनकी आंखें चकाचौंध रह गई थी, but gradually they came to senses कि भाई ये नहीं है. कैसे? Economically India remained backward. We see famines का सबसे बड़ा पीक तभी आता है जब कांग्रेस बनती है. 1870s and 1890s are the two decades when we had the peak of famine. इसमें 1-1 करोड़ लोग मारे गए, 1-1 करोड़. उसके बीच बनी है कांग्रेस. आप ये सोचो, आई वाज रीडिंग अ बुक 2 days ago ओनली बाय अ हिस्टोरियन, बड़ी किताब है मोटी. उसमें सुन लिखा है 1891 का कांग्रेस सेशन जब होता है, 1891 का, हाउ डू पीपल गो टू कांग्रेस सेशंस? दे हैपन इन वन कॉर्नर ऑफ इंडिया. फ्रॉम रेस्ट ऑफ इंडिया people have to travel there. They travel by railway only. So railway created the facilitation of people's travel. People could have congress sessions in different parts of India. ठीक है, चलो. But when they go, how do they go? They go from station to station. उनको पहुंचने में 2 दिन 3 दिन लग जाते हैं. तब तो वंदे भारत नहीं थी. So at that time, people could see in famine कि लोगों की लाशें पड़ी हुई है, हड्डियां बाहर आई है, भीख मांग रहे हो, तो एंटायर ट्रैवल ऑफ 2-3 days जर्नी वुड बी सो पीपल वुड, टीवी नहीं था, अखबार नहीं थे, फोटो नहीं थे उस तरह जैसे आज होते हैं, अखबार थे बट इतने फोटो नहीं छपते थे. So if you go from Madras to Amritsar, let us say for a session, you have to cross entire India and you would see so many dead bodies on the travel. इस सब जगह भूख है, अकाल पड़ा हुआ है. By the time you reach in Congress session, आपकी आंखें लाल हो जाती थी कि भाई ये तो मैं, this is not tolerable. And that is what people have written diaries की इस स्टेशन पे मैंने देखी 50 लाशें, यहाँ पे 200 लाशें चला रहे थे, मेरे आंखों में पानी आ रहे बोलते बोलते. But this is I have read the lines. The author is Zoya Chatterjee. अभी किताब आई, आई डोंट रिकॉल द नेम, बेडरूम में पड़ा हुआ है, मोटी किताब है, हरी वाली, डोंट रीड, आपके लिए नहीं है. बट इकोनॉमिकली इंडिया रिमेन बैकवर्ड. Politically, there was no growth of self-government despite the pretensions. And culturally, there was increasing lack of confidence as well as hostile British attitude towards educated Indians. These educated Indians who were led to believe that they are different, they are elite, and we are liberal. So if you arise, अगर अंग्रेजों का ये argument है that you are low in civilization, if you absorb our language, our value, our culture, then you become capable of having equal treatment. ये लोग थे, कहा कि हम हो गए इक्वल, वी हैव एब्सॉर्ब्ड ऑल योर वैल्यूज, गिव अस इक्वालिटी, गिव अस सेम जॉब्स. अंग्रेजों ने नहीं किया. व्हेन इवन आफ्टर बिकमिंग वेस्टर्नाइज्ड दे वर सेड कि ना, यू वोंट हैव इक्वालिटी. एट दैट टाइम इट वाज स्पेसिफिकली ह्यूमिलिएटिंग फॉर दिस मिडिल क्लास. तब उनको अकल लगी भाई ये क्या बात है. तो जो हम खुद को समझ रहे थे हम अलग है बाकी देश से, दे केम टू नो अलग नहीं हो. ठीक है. Then there was a racial arrogance of the British. Although educated, Indians were first to feel the humiliation. Such racial dominance appalled everyone's self-respect gradually. There's a foreign alien character of British produced a counter feeling of patriotism. The conflict between British interest and Indian interest led to the rise of anti-colonial consciousness. This led to the beginning of modern national movement, which represented all sections of the population. In this, the tiny middle class intelligentsia created an ideological background. I hope you understood यहाँ तक. अब आता है आखिरी and an important point, that is the beginning or emergence of modern public sphere. Public sphere. अब ये चीज क्या है? सिंपल बात ये है कि it is a kind of activity which is relatively open for everybody to take part in. जैसे कि न्यूज़पेपर्स, सब लोग लिख सकते हैं, पढ़ सकते हैं, बात कर सकते हैं. You have today internet, Instagram, Facebook. It's a public sphere. It's a modern public sphere. In the 19th century, what were modern public spheres? Newspapers, printing technology, writing books. Then you had associations, organizations and clubs. तो यहाँ पे जो राइजिंग मिडिल क्लास है, हाउ डिड इट स्टार्ट एक्सचेंजिंग आइडियाज? उसके लिए व्हाट वेर द थिंग्स दैट फैसिलिटेटेड सच कमिंग टुगेदर, बिकॉज ऑफ विच दे कुड एक्सचेंज आइडियाज एंड दे कुड फील दैट दे आर पार्ट of the same community of people. So here you go back to a very famous historian and sociologist. His name was, anybody? Benedict Anderson. सुना है नाम आपने उसका? It's a term, this print culture and public sphere, उस तरह से आती है term called imagined community. He passed away a few years ago. जब गुजर गए थे उस समय, there was a great article that came in some newspaper written by Ram Guha. If I find it, I will share it with you. He says कि how does a modern nationalism emerge? It is when all the people who would never meet each other imagine that they are part of the same. वसुधैव कुटुंबकम. कहाँ आपका कुटुंब है? सच में तो है नहीं. You have to imagine that, and then you feel that you are part of the same nation. If you feel you are. A book called Felt Community. We are the felt community, imagined community. Or why does this imagination happen? This imagination could happen because you have a public sphere where you debate and discuss. अब पंजाब में फार्मर का जो कुछ हो रहा है, do you feel good or bad? Whatever you may feel, good or bad, that is because you read newspapers. So it is, अगर newspaper नहीं होता आपको क्या पता चलता है कैसे सिंगू वाटर पे आज के दिन नहीं पता चलता. So you are imagining them and then you are feeling connected or against whatever it is. So it is the emergence of modern public sphere that creates the occasion for imagination of India is a modern nation. Example देता हूँ, take Bombay and Calcutta. अब Bombay में you have cotton mills, and these cotton mills are getting ill treatment by British taxation policy. Import duty change कर दी, exchange ratio डॉलर रुपी टू पाउंड मैनिपुलेट कर लिया, जो अंग्रेज बार बार करते थे to destroy Indian industry. And they have their grievance and they're angry with British policy. Ab you are a farmer or let's say clerk sitting in Calcutta. How do you feel? Does it matter to you at all कि बॉम्बे में एक कॉटन मिल चलेगी या बंद पड़ेगी? कुछ नहीं फर्क पड़ना आपको जिंदगी में, आपको कुछ भी नहीं फर्क पड़ना. बट व्हेन यू रीड द न्यूज़पेपर कि ब्रिटिश आर डूइंग दिस बॉम्बे पीपल, आपका खून गर्म होता है. So it is this modern public sphere which connected people who may or may not have interconnected economic interests. You imagine कि हम एक देश के पार्ट हैं. So that is the modern public sphere through which this literate, educated class start talking to each other. ठीक है? हाँ. So rapidly spreading print culture led to the emergence of modern public sphere. I have discussed this term already. हमने पढ़ी है term. याद है आपको? मैंने कहा था हैबरमास वगैरह, फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन का नाम लिया था मैंने. कुछ याद है आपको? नहीं याद है. तो anyway, ठीक है. तो यह है प्रिंट कल्चर. तो इसमें क्या क्या आता है? फर्स्ट थिंग इज मॉडर्न प्रेस, जर्नलिज्म. देयर इमर्ज्ड सेवरल जर्नल्स with nationalist content and vision in both English and vernacular. By 1870s, vernacular print media proliferated and became more effective and played major role. Press was the chief instrument to spread message of patriotism and spread all India consciousness. Press का रोल क्या था? जो the phrase that is used by Bipin Chandra कि press was both newspaper and newspaper. It represented Indian feeling and emotions and ideas and impact and suffering to the British, and it also represented British idea का policy criticism to Indians. Press is the mediator जो पढ़ा रही है अंग्रेजों को भी इंडिया में क्या कर रहे हो आप, और इंडियंस को भी अंग्रेज क्या कर रहे हैं. It is giving news and also present. It was propaganda. It was political education. It was political awareness. सब कुछ किया है. तो press was very important for आप. If you go to first Congress session of 1885, you will come to know in Mumbai. You'll come to know that almost 30-40%. I don't know the exact number. कल के हैंडआउट में रहेगा वो, मैं भूल गया हूँ. But 20-30-40% majority of the people who were delegates in the first Congress were owners of newspapers. तो हम आज की जो बात करते हैं, पॉलिटिक्स इज ट्राइंग टू कंट्रोल मीडिया, ये नई बात थोड़ी है. ये तो मीडिया की शुरुआत ही वहां से होती है, मॉडर्न मीडिया की. बट एट दैट टाइम इट वाज इन अ वेरी प्रोग्रेसिव सेंस, इन अ वेरी गुड सेंस. So what the role was performed by press? It presented views of Indian life, critique of British policies and its impact on India to the British. Issues like racial discrimination, injustice to Indians, economic exploitation were highlighted to argue that British rule resulted in economic and intellectual subordination to Indians to Britain. Simple बात यह है, आप ये समझो, at that time there is no legislature which is working. There are no elections. Elections है नहीं, legislature अगर है तो भी कुछ अधिकार नहीं है उसके पास. It's very feeble, 10-12 लोग हैं वहां पे. So there is no political sector. There is only executive, only ICS, IPS there in the country. And अभी उस समय का जो जीजी है, Viceroy, he is cabinet secretary of that time, running the country altogether. There is no prime minister, no MP, no MLA. Where is the debate? Where is the opposition? For any state to function, you have to have a very credible opposition properly. Then in the absence of politics of parliament, it is the press which performed the role of opposition to the government through editorials. Political opposition का role, ये बहुत बड़ी बात है. Then it also tried to educate people by raising important issues and to spread ideas about political rights among the common people. So simple है, especially the vernacular newspaper. It was extremely important, vernacular newspaper, for education, awareness. I will write these 4 words, you should copy them. Political education or awareness, political propaganda. and political opposition. ठीक है? Rather, what I can say collectively that it is completely politicization of masses. इसकी शुरुआत प्रेस करती है, मॉडर्न प्रेस. You have to make them aware कि भाई आपके इश्यूज क्या है. You have to articulate the issues. पता ही नहीं होते हमें, बस सफरिंग है, बट किसकी वजह से, क्यों है, क्या है, who is responsible for that. So you have to politicize the masses. Newspaper and newspaper. Then it was through the print media that people living in disparate regions were able to establish a certain kind of communication with one another. I just discussed it with example. They actually carried news information with which the local context was always not necessarily associated. So Bengal and Calcutta is the best example. This reporting was on the kind of agenda that the Congress had set out for Indians. A certain degree of national consensus had begun to emerge on certain critical issues. तो 1885 में कांग्रेस आएगी वो तो अलग बात है, बट हमारे इश्यूज, किस इश्यूज के लिए हम लड़ रहे झगड़ रहे, वो इश्यूज का कंसेंसस क्रिएट होने में 2 पीढ़ियां लगी, 2 generations, just to find out कि हमारे इश्यूज क्या है. We try, experiment, argue, find out, counter argument, debate करते करते this is our national demand. इसके लिए हम लड़ेंगे. It takes time. That was the role of press before 1885, and even after Congress formation, it remained to be. आप मुझे एक बड़ा नेता दिखाओ in freedom movement जिसने जो पत्रकार नहीं था, एक भी नहीं है. Right wing, left wing, everybody is writing all the time. All the debates happen in public domain. Without public articulation in newspaper, you cannot become national leader at that time. बनी आप नेता बनी नहीं सकते देश के. Thus, it played an important role in the rise of Indian nationalism. By 1875, almost 400 plus Indian-owned newspapers, mostly in vernaculars, and there was readership of around 1.5 lakh. So, जैसे कि हर in Punjab you have the Tribune, in Madras you have the Hindu, in Bombay you have Kesari, Maratha, Hindu Prakash, and Voice of India. In Bengal you have Bengali and ABP and many other. Many other. अब ये बात ये है कि it is 1.5 lakh people, but as I discussed, it did not, बस 1.5 लाख लोग नहीं पढ़ रहे इसको. This is the type of reading you had at that time. Common public, you sit and discuss. एक पेपर पढ़ने 10 लोग हैं. There is library movement. There is common reading. People come and discuss on चौराहा. That is how you politicize the masses, especially in case of vernacular newspaper. इसलिए मैंने कहा यहाँ पे in other regions, you have, and vernaculars actually had much more impact. British were very much angry of vernacular. In 1870s, we'll discuss after some time, we have Vernacular Press Act, whereby it was a censorship, a gagging order. It was not for no reason. British knew the impact that vernacular press can have on common people. आज के दिन में वही है. इंग्लिश में 2-4 लोग % न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ते हैं, and majority people Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, Bangla. So it has not changed. The second thing, apart from the press, is that you have patriotic literature coming up. And here the list is made from NCERT only, old NCERT, जहाँ पे you have names of authors and the languages to which they belong. These are the first or second or third very पहले 2-4 लोग जो उस भाषा के बड़े-बड़े कवि लेखक रहे हैं, who wrote many books, novels, poetry, etc. to awaken the masses using history and poetry. उनके नाम है. तो I hope you know this name, Subramaniam Bharati, great Tamil poet. On him, recently in last 3-4 months, 2 किताबें publish हुई है. So in front line, there are a couple of reviews of those books. हिंदू में भी review आया था भारती के ऊपर. तो थोड़ा सा भारती को देख के जाना. We'll see Bharati later on when you come to extremists. थोड़ा देख लेंगे उनको. Bhartendra Harishchandra is father of modern Hindi. We know him. Altaf Hussain Hali, he wrote Urdu. He was also the Shishya, the disciple, follower, and biographer of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Then Chiplunker wrote in Marathi. उन्होंने कहा था कि भाई English is the milk of English. English language is the milk of English tigress. उसको पियो तो आपको ताकत आ जाए. Then Bankim Chatterjee and Tagore, I don't need to explain them at all. And we have Bes Barua in Assami also. So we have many languages. All these people writing patriotic literature. दैट स्प्रेड्स नेशनल। पहली बात तो मॉडर्न प्रेस, सेकंड इज पैट्रियोटिक लिटरेचर, एंड थर्ड थिंग इज व्हाट आर द आइडियाज बीइंग टॉक्ड थ्रू दिस मॉडर्न प्रेस एंड मॉडर्न बुक्स, आइदर हिस्ट्री और इकोनॉमी। तो वी हैव ड्रेन थियरी एंड रिराइटिंग ऑफ हिस्ट्री। अब पहले ड्रेन थियरी देख लेते हैं, we'll discuss it much later in next lecture, but here I'm just covering the points. The train theory put forward by leaders like Dadabhai Naoroji exposed the true face of British rule in India. It explained how India was being systematically impoverished by the British and connected Indian poverty, hunger and famine to British rule. ये important बात है to understand the impact of drain theory, because entire propaganda was that we are here for your civilization. हम आपकी बेहतरी के लिए, आप पिछड़े हो, हम आपको improve कर रहे हैं। But drain theory actually showed exactly opposite. आप आ गए इसलिए नुकसान ज्यादा, गरीबी आ गई। So British, see, आप ये समझो, whenever anybody rules, may it be Roman Empire or British Empire, it doesn't rule only by sword. तलवार के दम पे आप कैप्चर कर सकते हो, आप लगातार राज नहीं कर सकते। So what you need is twofold agenda. One is power, other is prestige. If you have only power and no prestige, your rule will be very short term, खत्म हो जाएगा जल्दी। प्रेस्टीज कहाँ से आएगा? Firstly, you should have an idea कि we have unlimited power, a myth of invincibility. British know that कि अफगान में हार गए, ये नहीं चलेगा, और प्रेस्टीज विल बी लॉस्ट, फिनिश सिंध पहले, ताकि कोई और बगावत करने से पहले घबराए। 57 हो गया, दिल्ली को तबाह कर दो। So you should have that fear in the mind of people. That is only one part. Secondly, you should have that eliteness कि हम अलग हैं, हम superior, हम बेहतर हैं, हमारे बिना आपका क्या, आप कुछ भी नहीं, inferior, superior syndrome, racist. So वो होना चाहिए। एंड तीसरी, हम आपके भले के लिए यहाँ पे, वी आर हियर फॉर योर बेनिफिट, वी आर बेनेवोलेंट पावर। तो वो भरोसा दिलाना, अगर आप वो कर पाओ, इफ इंडियंस इंटरनलाइज ब्रिटिश सुपीरियोरिटी, इफ इंडियंस एक्सेप्ट ब्रिटिश रूल देमसेल्व्स, तो द डिपेंडेंस ऑन पावर गेट्स रिड्यूस्ड, तो राज करना बड़ा आसान हो जाता है। तो गांधी को हम महान क्यों मानते हैं? इट्स नॉट बिकॉज कि वो तलवार लेके नहीं गए, कभी नहीं गए। The main rule of Gandhi is not to attack power, was to attack prestige. कि Indians can be free. You have to be confident. आप बस मान लो कि आप फ्री हो, आप फ्री हो गए सच में। That was truth. So यहाँ पे उस चीज की शुरुआत होती है, to attack the foundations of British rule, foundation of British prestige, that they are here for our benefit. That was started by train theory. The most important contribution of drain theory is to open the eyes of Indians and to show that British are not your friends. So this realization of the impact of British rule opened the eyes of Indian intelligentsia, and they started demanding politico-administrative reforms. The second thing is rewriting of history. It has always been an important agenda. It is even today an important agenda. I am not saying in sarcasm here. I am very honest about it. It has to happen. With every passing time, history gets outdated. मैंने शायद पहले बार इस लेक्चर में कहा था कि दुकान में गया किताब खरीदने के लिए, तो उसने पुरानी किताब ला के रखी कि भाई हिस्ट्री में क्या चेंज होगा। बहुत कुछ है। अब यू नाउ यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड इन सेंस हिस्ट्री में क्या क्या चेंज होता है। हिस्ट्री चेंजेस ड्रास्टिक, फैक्ट्स डोंट चेंज, द एनालिसिस चेंजेस, फैक्ट्स आर सैक्रेड, नो डाउट अबाउट इट। The point is that British had written their own version of Indian history, which was Hindu period, Muslim period, and British period, to show that Indians are despotic, they can never govern themselves, they are backward, they are destined to rule by foreigners. और हमने ही पहली बार ये खंड खंड में बटे हुए देश को जोड़ा है. That is the British version, and you are backward and uncivilized. But in the British era, exactly उल्टी चीजें होना शुरू होती है. We have the discovery of past greatness of India through Oriental studies first, and then by Indians themselves. For example, we have the discovery of the decipherment of Brahmi script. In 1830s, James Princip deciphered Brahmi script. तो उससे क्या होता है? You are able to read Ashokan edicts. They are spread across India. You know, अच्छा, आज से 2,200 साल पहले इंडिया यूनिफाइड था. तो अंग्रेज क्या बड़ी इतनी बात कर रहे हैं, हम यूनिफाई क्या यूनिफाई, हम तो पहले यूनिफाई भी रह चुके हैं. अगर हम आपके आने से पहले हो सकते थे, आपके बिना भी हो सकते, आप चले जाओ. That is the very important confidence required. Then you have the discovery of Gupta Empire. the golden coins, numismatics evolving. The moment Gupta Empire was a great golden age. We have achieved the greatness of polity, society, economy, culture, language, drama, music, painting. Even before British came, why can't we do it alone? We don't need British to show us culture. हम already cultured थे. So you have this history writing as a very important political project which created a counter narrative. उसका जो हिस्सा हम आज देख रहे थे रिसेंटली कि हम पहले भी डेमोक्रेटिक रह चुके हैं, डेमोक्रेसी भी पास्ट में थी. इट इज समटाइम्स, तो हिस्ट्री राइटिंग इज ऑलवेज वेरी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड प्रोजेक्ट. इसमें भी दो दिक्कतें हुई, आई एम नॉट डिनाइंग दैट. दो दिक्कतें क्या हुई? पहली बात तो ये हुई इन सच काइंड ऑफ हिस्ट्री राइटिंग is that anything in the past was sometimes uncritically glorified. वो भी नहीं करना चाहिए. I mean, that's not good. There are good things and there are bad things. You should be clear about that, clear-eyed. But when British are opposing you, you think that you don't want to give them ammunition by your side, so you say कि no bad things, only good things. British always claim only bad things. You always claim only good things. आप दोनों सुनो, आपको अच्छा पता चल जाएगा. But if you have to oppose the British in that debate, you have to focus on good things. तो वहां पे तो excess good हो जाता है. You don't focus on critical things. That was one negative point. The second negative point was that whenever they looked for the past greatness, it was found only in ancient India and not in medieval India. That was a huge, as if there was no golden age in medieval time. As if there was no greatness in medieval time. पूरी सल्तनत एंड मुगलों की है, उसको bypass कर दिया गया. It was not the right thing to do. All the greatness, Vedic era, Gupta era, Mauryan era, Chola Empire, वो अच्छा था, no doubt there are many great things. But you should not have bypassed medieval time. But वहां पे हो गया. And exactly if you read the history being written by Muslims intellectuals at that time, they would say कि भाई इंडिया में प्री इस्लाम में कुछ ज्यादा काम का था ही नहीं, जो कुछ अच्छा था मेडिवल में ही था. So you have history writing itself as a very problematic territory, no doubt about it, no doubt. But at this juncture, in this context, it was very important to instill the confidence amongst Indians. Then you have awareness about international events. American Revolution of 1776 was the first expression of nationalism in modern sense. The success of revolutionaries inspired the educated classes all over the world. Then you have in 1789 onwards, French Revolution. In 1850s and 60s, you have Germans and Italians trying to become, so America ban gaya, France modern ban gaya, German Italy ban gaya, तो हम क्यों नहीं? So you see the progress of nationalism across the world. अब हमारा नंबर आएगा.